Something really important to do before you fire up a brand new engine is figure out the fuel system. So, sadly, Chevrolet doesn't have a seat that folds forward so you can get to the gas tank. You have to take the seat completely out. But the owner of the truck has purchased a brand new gas tank for it. So that's what we're going to accomplish today. We're going to get the seat out. We're going to take the tank out and see what it looks like. And with the new one, we'll put that one in. So that way we'll have a good solid foundation for basically firing up the motor. So the seat is kind of annoying to get in and out. Basically there's 4 bolts. 2 in the back here and then 2 in the front here that need to come out. So 8 bolts in total. And then I'm going to try to get this seat out by myself. We'll see how that goes. A lot of times I love taking seats out of cars that obviously still have original carpet. There's a lot of cool stuff you can find, but this one is not one of them. I was hoping for a bunch of empty stuff, and there really isn't any. So there's an amp that goes, I'm assuming, with that aftermarket radio that's mounted to the floor. So I'm going to leave that alone. There's an old flashlight, and then a bunch of mouse turds. There's not even one coin or nickel or dime or anything. Super disappointing. But with the seat moved out of the way, I decided not to take it out because I don't want it to get rained on. But also, I feel like I can get to this gas tank and get to what I need to without that. Yeah, see? Boring piece of paper. Nothing really. Here's a Wintermint gum, but that's about it. Nothing super exciting. We'll get this tank out and we'll see what it looks like. Oop, there's looks like a paper type shield in front of it. And with out of the way, you can kind of see the tank. There's the sender right there in the middle. A couple of vent tubes on that side, and then there's also the same vent tube and filler neck on this side. So I'm assuming once you pull it out, you have to take it out this way so that the filler neck can go out with the gas tank. I got the tank out, and the main thing that I struggled with to get this tank out was I had to take these seat belts out. So the way the tank was installed, it had these little pieces of metal and bolts that kind of held it in, but the seat belt, these little tabs on the end, were on top of the tank. So I wasn't able to move it with those in, so those had to come out, but it didn't take that much extra. There's some creepy stuff in here, guys. But I did find some coins, so that's good. Here is the tank. Now these tanks, since they're inside the cab, I'm assuming they're usually in pretty good shape. I believe 1271, I believe this is an original tank. I don't know as much about these trucks as I do a Corvette. I could tell you if a Corvette had an original tank, but with these stampings, I would think so. The problem with these tanks is that the filler neck is pointed upwards toward the sky, so rain can't get in it. Now this neck looks pretty bad. What we can do is we can see, I'll take the sender out, we can base a lot on the sender, and we can see what the inside of this tank looks like. Even though the tank on the outside looks good, it might be rusty on the inside. And I feel like these tanks are pretty cheap, so there's nothing wrong with replacing it no matter what. With the lock ring removed, well, maybe I could remove it if it wasn't really stupid. Anyway, with that removed, go. Come on. So there is gas in here. I can smell it, and it's nasty. Could get that out with one hand. That'd be cool too. All right. So here's the sender. Pretty typical. This sock is just trash. See, this is why you want to replace the tank. See that? That's straight up rust clogging that up. But try to use this tank as it was, it would have been problems. If the sender looks like this, you know the bottom of the tank's just got issues. So we can test and see if the sender will still read, and if it's a good sender, we can just put a new sock on it and put that back in. We'll see what the customer wants to do. Here's the new tank, which looks a lot like the old tank, which is definitely a good thing. Let's see, the only difference is the holes are different shape. But it should go in and it should look good. So we made sure we get the correct one with the little vent tube thing right here. And the other thing, it doesn't come with a sender, so I'm going to see if the customer wants to put a new one in, or if he wants me to put a new sock on that one if the sender still works on that. But luckily we can put the tank in without having to worry about putting the sender in yet. So that's always a good thing. Here's a good visual why you should replace all rubber on old cars. So this fuel line isn't under any pressure. It really doesn't have gas going through it almost at all, only when you fill up. Basically it vents the fumes back up and out. But I mean, look, it's cracking and as hard as a rock. Let's see if I can cut it. But yeah, that kind of stuff, it needs replaced. It needs replaced badly. This winter has been, at least in Texas, ups and downs. Warm, cold, warm, cold. Today is one of those warm days. I'm taking advantage of it. We got the new fuel sender in. You see it right there. It's beautiful. New sock, new float, new sender, new everything. It's not full of rust like this one. And the cool part is they're pretty much identical, other than the end. That's pretty gross. The other thing that we're going to do is all the rubber fuel lines top to bottom on this truck will be replaced. So there's ones that go to the sender, ones that for the return line, I believe that's what those are, I don't know. And then we're going to do everything underneath the truck going toward the motor. So that will be today's project, and hopefully once we get that done, put the seat belts back in and then scoot the seat back. I have new carpet, but I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to wait until the truck runs to do cosmetics. We are so close to firing this engine up. There's a couple little things that stop me. One, this takes 1/4-inch fuel hose for the emission stuff. Weird. But let me give you a little update. So the fuel pump is plumbed all the way to the tank and then up to the engine. I usually like to do metal from basically the pump to the carburetor, but in this case with the Edelbrock pump, the stock line doesn't really fit in it, and so that's how we're going to do it for now. If the owner wants to change it, he definitely can, but this is the cheapest way to go without getting my own line and bending it and spending time to do that. The other thing we did besides the fuel line is we have a return spring, but I want to show you guys this bracket that I got for the throttle and kickdown cables. So basically the way this works is this sits like this behind the carburetor. It's going to mount pretty much like this, and there's a slot on the top for the throttle cable, which is right here. Basically you need to position that where it needs to be. It's adjustable, so you can get the carburetor all the way open like that with the gas pedal. That's the goal. That's why this is adjustable. There's also on the bottom, I've taken it off, but this part goes on the bottom right here, and that holds this transmission kickdown cable bracket on. I would use this one, but I mean the real problem is this one just doesn't fit on this Vortec engine. The holes don't really line up in the back, and I think it'll just be cleaner to use one bracket, you know, one and done, and just be done. So that's what we're going to do with that. Something weird is somebody's welded that, but it should still work. I'm not worried about it. You have a provision on this bracket here on the bottom to put the springs on the bottom from the bracket to the lever, but the problem is with this kickdown cable attached here, there's really no room for it. So we put a bracket in the front and the springs in the front. I may or may not remove one of these springs. It just depends on how hard it is to push down the gas pedal. But I haven't gotten to that point yet. Well, we will. After that is done, really it's just wiring. I mean, we put one small new harness in it, but I need to get this AC pump up and out of the way. I need to figure out where all the other wiring is for the rest of the motor. For the temp sender, for the ignition, I need to wire up the electric choke. And then I need to figure out how the battery cables go and if I need to add any kind of ground cables. We are so close to starting this engine. I have everything for the transmission all hooked up. One thing we have to do before we fire it is we have to pre-oil it. So in the instructions for Blueprint, they talk about removing all the spark plugs and then spinning the motor over in order to pretty much get oil everywhere in the motor. Remember, this motor has already run, okay? So it's been on a dyno. It's not the first time it's ever started. But this is just, who knows how long it's been sitting since it dynoed, and, how long it's been sitting in my shop. So it's just always a good thing to do. The next is going to be put these spark plugs in. They recommend the 41-993 iridium spark plugs. And they want them gapped at 45 thousandths is what they want. After that, it's really just plug in the distributor, check the coolant, check the oil. I got to wire up the electric choke, and we're going to fire it. It is the next day, and it is time to start up this truck. So a couple things, 5 gallons of gas in the gas tank. I'm going to spin the motor over in order to prime the fuel system with the ignition unplugged. But another thing I figured out is this alternator is an internal regulated alternator, and the one that I took off, remember I was talking about the little plug versus the big plug, that has an external regulator, which is right there. So it's pretty easy to bypass. Basically, you just grab the red and the brown wires from the plug and put them onto the alternator. I will loom this up really nice and make it all pretty and professional, but right now I just have it here in order to get the truck to run and make sure the battery charges. If it doesn't, that's okay, because the engine will run long enough to get it to charge. So according to the book, we need to start it up. You need to set the timing, check for all the leaks, make sure there's no fuel leaks or water leaks or oil leaks, and then let it run for 15 minutes at 2,000 RPM. Alright, the oil system is primed, the fuel system is primed. Turned it over with the spark plugs out, turned it over with the spark plugs in. Haven't found any leaks or any problems at all. So we have gas in the carburetor. Let's plug in the ignition. One, I can't see the mark on the balancer, so I'm going to have to remark it. But two, this line right here was leaking, so I'm going to do a quick fix and just put a a little nub on it with some transmission hose, and it'll be just fine. It was leaking out of the fitting, which was weird, not out of the threads, but between the fitting and the hose. So obviously there's something wrong with it, but it made a big mess. So we'll get that fixed. I don't want to run it anymore while that's just pumping transmission fluid into my driveway.